our viewers, we are bringing this a very special broadcast on the occasion of 76th Independence Day from this magnificent, newly refurbished Kartavya Path. And I'm being joined by a very special guest to talk on India's independence and India's foreign policy, Mr. Jay Panda. So thank you so much for finding out time for this interview.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Sir, India's growth story, everyone talks about this growth story from New Delhi under British Raj to becoming the new diplomatic capital of the world, from Rajpath to Kartavya Path. What is your analysis when we say that India has come a long way? How do you see this growth story?
Well, there's a complete transformation, apart from becoming the fifth largest economy on the way to becoming the third largest. India has now become the fastest growing large economy in the world, a post that used to be held by China for many decades.
Yeah.
And the world's view of India has changed dramatically. So it was seen at its best during the pandemic, when the largest vaccination campaign in the history of humankind was conducted by India in the shortest time. And post that also, India's economic performance has been the best under challenging circumstances throughout the whole world. And India has also been helping many other nations, including many of our neighbors. So there's that whole transformation. But this transition, when completing Amrit Mahotsav, 75 years of independence, and as the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has shaped this vision of Amrit Kal, the next 25 years when India will become a developed country by the time of its 100th independence, there is one aspect of work that is still happening under Modi ji's leadership, which is to shake off that colonial mindset. So, for example, this transformation from a colonial era Lutyens Delhi
Mindset
to develop Kartavya Path, for so many decades, this has been considered as if Indians could not ever consider doing anything better than what the British Raj had done. And so any talk, if you remember when the Kartavya Path project was first floated, how many people reacted with negativity and shock and horror. But look at the work that has been done. Look at the Parliament extension. Old Parliament building was crumbling and a safety hazard. Look at the whole design. It is world class. It maintains the same theme of the great architecture around here. And yet there is a major difference. It is people-centered. It is not government-centered. And the name itself, from Rajpath to Kartavya Path, reflects
the change in the mindset.
The change in the mindset. There are many examples. Recently you have seen some so-called intellectuals, some so-called media have been caught out being on the payroll of foreign governments and running propaganda against India. That is an example of that continuing colonial mindset which has to be completely shaken off, and the work is well underway.
Mr. Panda, in fact, you mentioned that point. I was coming to that question. So, Prime Minister, while speaking in Parliament, said that in his third term, when he'll be re-elected in 2024, this is what he said, India is going to be the third largest economy. Now, whenever this entire narrative is given out by BJP, then opposition has to say that India is growing because India is meant to grow. It is India's movement. What is BJP doing? What is Prime Minister doing? So, as an expert of foreign policy subject, one who understands geopolitics, geoeconomics, how money flows in, how money flows out, I would like you to break it down for our viewers that is it happening in an organic way, or is it because of the policy or the decision making that has been done by Narendra Modi's government, or both factors are playing their roles?
Look, let me be very clear.
And be honest.
I'll be very honest. This sort of transformation does not happen on autopilot. The Congress ruled this government, not ruled this country, not governed, but ruled for so many decades. And for the vast majority of that period, India had an extremely low growth rate. And so many other countries surpassed us. All the East Asian countries were poorer than India at the time of our independence.
All businesses also went away.
So, even look at the situation when Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister. There was the first major thrust on infrastructure, the Golden Quadrilateral, the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojanas, which made roads to villages throughout the country, all-weather roads. So, when Atalji's term ended, we had a growth rate of 9% and inflation of 4.5%. By the time the UPA government ended its term 10 years later, they had reversed that. So we had a growth rate of just about 4% and inflation of nearly 10%. Now, so it doesn't happen on autopilot, and it has taken tremendous willpower, tremendous application of political capital to bring about these changes. You know, it's not an easy, a lot of tough decisions have been taken. GST was pending for 2 decades and it was implemented by the Modi government. It has simplified 17 taxes into 1 tax. It has led to huge surges in revenue for the nation and especially for states. And those states which used to oppose GST 6 years ago, today are all on board because they have all benefited from it. And I've already spoken about India's changed image throughout the world. So you can see the kind of hard work that goes into it. Modi ji has not taken a day's holiday in these 9 years that he's been Prime Minister. He works 20-hour schedules per day. So it is not an autopilot. People sitting in opposition are constantly trying to denigrate India, are constantly trying to find fault with the policies of the government. Now these are the very policies which has brought India to this position of being 5th largest, fastest growing economy and soon to become the 3rd largest economy.
Okay, so now I would like to draw your attention to this entire new theater of Indo-Pacific. Now, many geopolitical experts believe and they say that US is interested in India, West is interested in India, perhaps all other nations are coming to India. India is the new diplomatic capital. From last 1 year, there have been very many or perhaps various high-level visits to India. So they say that it has to do with the Indo-Pacific because West or perhaps these powers want India to be positioned against China so that the balance could be maintained in Asia. How do you look at India's role in Indo-Pacific, and how do you also see this entire narrative that West is looking at India only because West wants to balance the power in Asia? How do you look at this narrative when geopolitical experts say this?
I think that's a great question. First of all, the term Indo-Pacific itself is very telling. In the West's narrative, they had until recently used the phrase Asia-Pacific. And only a few years ago did the US and others start referring to this region as the Indo-Pacific. This is very telling because for thousands of years, India was an enormous presence throughout Asia, throughout the world, as a center where people used to come from all over the world for learning, for education, for making their fortune, for religious learning. And yet by the time we got independent, because of centuries of colonial and foreign rule, we had become a shadow of our former selves. And we were not considered to have that kind of clout. And so it was being referred to as Asia-Pacific. The renaming as an Indo-Pacific recognizes the thousands of years of history and the rejuvenation and renaissance that India has undergone. And it reflects everything that we've been talking about, from the economic surge to the renaissance in our confidence and aspirational India with the largest workforce in the world.
Military might.
Well, our defense capacities have indeed gone up. We became the largest procurer, and now we are transforming that into developing technologies, co-production in India, and helping other countries. For the first time, India is in very significant amounts helping other countries with their defense capabilities. So there is a complete transformation, and
some countries are also getting upset.
Actually, if you leave aside 1 or 2 countries, you leave aside Pakistan, which has constantly got a bee in its bonnet about India because they chose to break away from us, and we have flourished, and they have, collapsed into penury. If you leave aside 1 or 2 other countries, which
Sir,
but let me complete this. The thing is, the vast majority of countries, over a long time, I have been involved in track 2 delegations throughout the world. And the vast majority of countries, leave aside 2 or 3, welcome the rise of India. They see India as a cooperative partner, as an economic superpower, as somebody that will help them in their times of crisis. You're seeing world leaders recognize that in the way they respond to our Prime Minister in their own country and in the way they give respect to our nation.
Adding on to what Mr. Panda has said, so I was speaking to one expert on the foreign policy subject. So I told this that Pakistan has become from Indo-Pak to AFPAC, but India has become Indo-Pacific. So that's how India is referred to by all the experts on foreign policy subject.
In fact, there is a further nuance.
Yeah.
AFPAC assumes that the problem is Afghanistan and Pakistan is always considered concurrently with it.
Yes.
But there are many experts who have started referring to it as PACAF. The real problem is actually Pakistan, which is the mother lode of terrorism, which is the mother lode of bad ideas, which is the mother lode of bad governance. And it has, look at the reaction that people in Afghanistan have towards Pakistan. They bitterly resent their interference.
Of course. Absolutely. Mr. Panda, since you are an expert on this subject, I would ask you to explain it for our viewers. When we say this G20, you get a call from your distant relative that there is one event happening in the college. What is this G20 all about? What Modi ji is going to do? What India is going to do? How is it going to shape the global narrative? What changes it's going to get? What problems exactly this multilateral event is going to solve? So there are a lot of queries which come up. Who is Sherpa? What is the role of Sherpa? What does Sherpa do? If Sherpa is there, then what is the role of foreign minister? Such kinds of queries do come up. I would ask you to explain it for our viewers. A, what is India's role? B, how India hosting this is going to solve the world problems? And also if you could give some context to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict.
So, there was a major transformation over the last 2 decades. Earlier to that, the G7, which is a small group of rich countries, used to decide how to deal with global challenges on their own. And countries like India were completely out of it. Now, with the growth of India, the growth of the BRICS countries, G20, which is a grouping of 19 countries and the EU, has become much more important. The presidency is by rotation, but the transformation that G20 is going through with India's presidency is something quite phenomenal. Because if you look at the kind of events other countries have had, they've had events in 2 or 3 or 4 cities. We have it in more than 50 cities. They have events that run to 8 events or 10 events, 12 events. We are doing more than 200 events around the country. So the scale of India's presidency of G20 is mind-boggling.
We have more agendas also.
Right. And so we have large numbers of foreign delegates visiting India, seeing, participating in our culture. Those who come back to India after a long time, people from the West, people from other countries, are gobsmacked. Because they had seen a poor India, and today we are approaching middle income status and building world-class infrastructure. And as I said, the impact that we are having on the rest of the world is phenomenal. So the presidency of the G20 under Prime Minister Modi has proven to be quite an inflection point for G20 itself. Now, you mentioned the war in Europe and other places.
No, why I mentioned it, sir, I would like to tell you, because China and Russia have been constantly opposing the Para 3 and Para 4, and perhaps when the foreign ministers meeting also took place in the Mar, they objected to it, and we couldn't come out with the joint communique. Can we expect joint communique in the leaders summit, or can we have some sort of an agreement where the paragraphs are going to be rephrased, or consensus could be built? Do you see India building consensus and issuing joint communique in the heads of the state meeting?
So let me say that there are different challenges at different periods of time. Today, the war in Europe and the hostile activities of China in the Indo-Pacific region, when it concerns Japan, it concerns Vietnam and Philippines and Taiwan especially. So it's a very special kind of challenge, because there is a lot of saber rattling going on, and there is concern about how China will behave. We have personally seen, in India we have seen how China has broken all norms, broke a 45-year ceasefire, to what happened at Doklam
Yeah.
and Galwan.
Yeah.
So what I would say is communiques and all will happen. Sometimes they change. The same members who have agreed to a communique at the next meeting, sometimes they may not agree.
Yeah.
2 meetings later, they may agree. I think that's not the important facet. The important facet is the G20 presidency has showcased India as a major player and a player for the good. You earlier asked about whether the West sees India as a bulwark against China.
Yes.
Now, every country has its own national interest. The West may see us as a bulwark against China. The Chinese may see us as an economic threat.